King Charles has expressed regret for abuses during British colonial rule in East Africa. But the monarch stopped short of making a formal apology during a state visit to Kenya. The former British colony is celebrating 60 years of independence, and more recent events at a British Army training camp have not helped to improve relations.
This fire in the Loldaiga Hills in 2021 burned for days.
The fire destroyed approximately 12,000 acres of land.
The fire was started a few days ago by British troops carrying out training exercises in that part of the country.
That British involvement was clear to everyone.
So the cause of the fire was part of a British training exercise up there. So as you know, British and Kenyan forces regularly exercise up together in that area. It was an accidental fire that was started.
Linus Morangeri worked at the British camp. He died while fighting the fire. His widow, Karen Gatweri, is struggling to raise their two sons alone. She says the children are getting no compensation for the loss of their father.
If it were not for the British soldiers' training, my husband would still be alive. Whenever I see them, I do not wish them well, since they are the cause of my suffering. I cannot stop my face from changing when I see them. I feel bad. It is still very painful.
Not far away, Peter Masharia's grave. His brother Joseph Shege blames smoke from the fire for his death.
We laid him to rest here after a battle with chest illness. His chest was blocked. We took him to hospital and got him treated, but we couldn't get any help from the British side. He was overwhelmed, and he eventually died.
A consultancy report says Loldaiga will take until 2060 to recover. Kelvin Kubai represents people claiming compensation for the fire. He says they are at a similar disadvantage as the Mau Mau fighters, like his grandfather, who fought the British for independence.
We are fighting the same foe. And this same power, of course, tries in every way to resist its responsibility. Our grandfathers were fighting them with medieval weapons, some spears and clubs, and they had machine guns and planes then. They are fighting against an army that can afford the best lawyers in the country and tries to hide behind legal tussles and technicalities so as to evade responsibility.
King Charles III is technically head of that army. This week, during his visit to Kenya, he spoke about the atrocities against the Mau Mau fighters, but did not apologize.
The wrongdoings of the past are a cause of the greatest sorrow and the deepest regret. There were abhorrent and unjustifiable acts of violence committed against Kenyans as they waged, as you said at the United Nations, a painful struggle for independence and sovereignty. And for that, there can be no excuse.
Far from the glamour of the state banquet, Karen is trying to focus on the future. Her message to the king:
I would just like to see my kids get help on how they can go to school, since their father had envisioned educating them all the way, and for them to lead a good life.
The fire here at Loldaiga is among a number of incidents involving the British Army in Kenya being examined by a wide-ranging inquiry launched earlier this year.
Let's bring in Felix Moringa, who filed that report. Felix, the fire at the Army training base is one source of grievance, but there have been many others. Tell us about them.
The lawyer I spoke to in that report also represented Agnes Onjiro, who was raped and killed and thrown in a septic tank about 12 years ago. Efforts to find compensation or even the soldier tried in Kenya have proved futile. Some of the Mau Mau fighters still hold wounds that were inflicted on them back then, and they still haven't gotten any compensation. Lastly, people in the northern Kenya, where British soldiers also train, have many unreported cases of rape, destruction of property, and many other cases that they haven't reported. And the saddest bit of it all is that every time they try lodge a case in court, they're told these soldiers have immunity, so they cannot be tried in Kenya.
King Charles has admitted to colonial-era abuses when Britain tried to violently suppress Kenyan independence, but he didn't apologize. How was that received in the country?
So a group called Africa Rising had actually issued a statement immediately after King Charles' statement, and they said that regret and sorrow without a direct apology does not count for anything. Another Kenyan said that it was so sad that King Charles was in Kenya, on Kenyan soil, and has not apologized. A group of Mau Mau war veterans also said that they felt shortchanged by the fact that the king had not issued a direct apology to them.
And what about Kenya's government? Are they pushing for an apology and compensation, maybe even?
So during the state banquet hosted by President William Ruto, he said that as much as Britain had tried to atone for the pain and sorrow and the injuries meted on Kenyans during the colonial period, he said that more needed to be done. And this is the closest that the Kenyan president actually came from to seeking reparations for the wrongs. But many Kenyans are feeling that President William Ruto actually chose the softer way instead of asking for even some of the artifacts that are stored in the British Museum when the king was on Kenyan soil.
That's Felix Moringa from Nairobi. Thank you so much for your reporting.